We started last week, and because of time and the volume of the amount of questions we're supposed to review, share some thoughts on, we decided to have these 2 hours as the last class for the past question and answer session. And subsequently, so that we can run, because we have 10 more chapters after this, so that we can run, this will be the last class for the Q&A session. So we share the past questions wherever we stop today. Please go ahead and use it to practice as you read this chapter, so it can resonate with you, and you would develop your technique, your exam technique, so you could ace any topic that comes around the audit approach. So we stopped at I'm trying to toggle my screen, pardon me. Okay, we stopped at the last question, which was the same November 2023, question 2. That was what we treated last. ABC Limited, the C part of that question. So today we'll be looking at the same November 2023, question 6, which the title or header of that question is Reliable Limited. So we'll continue with that, and it's a long read, so I'll be fast. The question reads, Reliable Limited is into wholesale and retail supply and distribution of stationaries to companies and educational institutions. The company maintains business relationship with other enterprises that are owned by close friends and relatives. The books of account of the company are kept manually and in simple Excel. The company had only staff in the accounts department since it's a small business operation. A review of the company's operations shows that the inventory of stationaries purchased are not properly valued due to incomplete recording of purchases made. Although bank statements are obtained, the balances on the bank statement are not reconciled with the cash book. Cash from sales made are not banked intact, and expenses relating to cash takings from till were not all recorded or properly monitored. Added to this, goods bought from related parties were sometimes overvalued as suppliers made frivolous claims which could not be disputed due to poor record keeping. The MD and owner of the company has been sick for some time, and the wife concentrated more on her own business, leaving the operations of the company to a relative who is not well educated. Available evidence revealed that invoices and vouchers of the company were approved without management review, and the procedure or selection of suppliers was not transparent. The company has just won a contract for supply of stationaries in one of the states in the federation, and it was found that there was inadequate cash flow to execute the contract. The manager of the company informed the MD's wife of the development, and it was agreed that a bank loan would be needed. On approaching the bank, an updated financial statement of the company was requested to determine the financial health of the business and ability to repay the loan when due. Your firm has been appointed as auditors of the company with stipulated deadline to complete the audit so that the company could meet the bank's conditions. The firm has conducted a preliminary review of the operations of the company, and some control gaps have been noted. Required. Discuss suitable control activities that would be required in the above scenario and how you assess the degree of effectiveness of the internal control systems. 10 marks. B. Identify and explain what the external auditors are expected to do during the course of the above audit. 5 marks. So we have a total of 15 marks. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, before us we have Reliable Limited. The question is a case study, and I think it tests our ability or your ability to identify and apply internal controls in a small business context. You see that the scenario for this Reliable Limited is a classic example of a weak control environment, which is part of what we've looked at under the control environment area of this chapter 6. The audit approach. Let's look at the provided solution. The A part correctly discusses suitable controls. It provides generic definitions of controls. Okay. On the B part, also, okay, in the course of the audit, okay, the B part also discussed the answer based on ISA 315, listing what the auditor should do to understand an internal control system. Okay, so let's look at the examiner's report. Yeah, the examiner's report highlights a common issue, lack of understanding of audit control concepts beyond simple recall, I think. So I think a good answer based on his report must show an ability to connect the theoretical concepts to the practical deficiencies in the case. Okay. Right. So let's share some thoughts on this answer. Let's look at how to and what to write. So don't forget, when you approach or you're practicing a question like this, you need to think of what to write and how to write. A lot of people may know what to write, but they don't know how to write it. So please practice around knowing how to write it. Predominantly, the problem is how to write it, communicate your thoughts in the way or in a way the examiner is going to give you your marks seamlessly. So for the part A, what to write, you need to first discuss suitable controls, control activities that would fix the problems at Reliable Limited. Then you need to explain how you as an auditor would assess if those controls are working effectively. That's key. You need to first discuss the suitable control activities that will fix the problems at Reliable Limited. Then you need to explain how you as the auditor would assess if those controls are working effectively. So how do you write such a question? How do you write such a technical question? So for the control activities, if you look at the answer, for the control activities, create a bullet list like you've seen in the answer. Create a bullet list or the numbered list. So for each control, state the control. So for example, segregation of duties. And then explicitly link it to a problem in the scenario. So for example, to address the one-person accounts department, duties like cash handling and record keeping should be separated. An answer like that will resonate with the examiner. And you must address the issues mentioned in the case: unrecorded purchases and poor inventory valuation, lack of bank reconciliations, cash from sales not being banked intact, overvaluation of related party transactions, lack of management review of invoices and vouchers. So these are issues you must mention. And in assessing effectiveness of the controls, you must discuss the two-step process: the design effectiveness, speaking to do the controls, or asking questions like, do the controls look good on paper? Then after looking at design effectiveness, look at implementation effectiveness, answering the question on, are they actually being applied? So we need to explain that the auditor does this through walkthroughs or test of controls. We've discussed all this in the lectures. So the answer provides a roadmap on that, and we should be able to answer that based on what the clear roadmap the examiner has provided. Okay, so for the B part, what the external auditor's role, don't forget the B part asks us to identify and explain what the external auditors are expected to do during the course of the audit. So 5 marks. So the B part, the external auditors, what are they to do? So what do you write? You see that is a direct question about the auditor's responsibilities under ISA 315. So you must identify and explain the key steps the auditor needs or the auditor takes to understand the entity's internal control system. So how do you write it? Like you've seen, use numbered list or a bullet list for each point. So state the action. For example, gain an understanding of the components of internal control, and then explain what that means in practice. So in explaining it, you could say the auditor will use inquiries observation, and inspection to understand the control environment. Speaking to the COSO framework, 5 of them: control environment, risk assessment, control activities, information system, and monitoring activities. So I think the provided solution does a good job on this. It did that very practically. So please go through the solution and use it as a roadmap. So general strategies in writing such a question to earn marks maximally. You need to apply. Try to apply. Don't just state. And this is the most crucial strategy for your exam. For every control and procedure you mention, you must explicitly link it to a specific problem in reliable, limited scenario. So for instance, mentioning authorization controls is good, like is provided in the solution. But I think linking it to the fact that invoices and vouchers were approved without management review will earn you the marks speedily. Of course, we've spoken about, or the solution provides authorization control is good. But then if you link that authorization control to the fact that the case stated invoices and vouchers were approved without management review, man, you pick your marks seamlessly. Another strategy, try to use professional language. Use terms like control environment, segregation of duties, analytical procedures, walkthrough testing, substantive procedures. You know, when you use terms like that in writing your answers, you make the examiner just mark you without really reading through the lines meticulously. This is very important. So make sure your terminologies are professional. Then address all parts of the question. Try to ensure you answer both parts, 15 marks of the question thoroughly, giving sufficient detail for each answer. Then time management. A general strategy I always talk about is a 15-mark question. So you need to allocate marks, approximately 1.8 minutes per mark. So part A is worth 10 marks. So spend more of the time on part A and less of the time on part B. And specific guidance on the marking key. Marking key. Let me see the marking guide. Okay. Take note of the marking guide. Identifying, okay, the correct. So for control activities, so you should aim at least 5 or 6 distinct controls that addresses directly the specific weakness in the case. So for example, a point could be implementing a formal policy for cash handling, requiring daily banking of all cash takings, and reconciliation by a separate person, something like that. Another could introduce a 3-way match for purchases, invoice, goods received, and POs to ensure proper valuation and recording. So the assessment, the marking guide spoke to, okay, design and implementation effectiveness, awarding marks, okay. And the second B part, marking guide, okay. To get that full marks for the B part, you should list and briefly explain 5 of the key expectations of the external auditor when gaining an understanding of the client's internal control. So the points provided in the solution, I think, are excellent examples, such as gaining an understanding of the 5 components of internal control by the COSO framework, documenting the system, performing walkthroughs, and exercising judgment. I think the solution, it's a good one, and it provides a perfect roadmap. All right. So that's it for this beautiful question. I like the question on internal controls. Any question on internal controls always makes me nostalgic, actually. I like questions like that. They are good. Maybe because I'm into internal controls, internal audit, I don't know. But I like such questions. All right. So any question on that, so that we can move to the next one. And please feel free to interject freely if you have any concerns, any thoughts on the questions generally we are trying to practice. Any question, any observation, any recommendation? Don't mind me, I'm trying to run to see how much we can cover in this short time we have. We have just 2 hours to finish. So wherever we stop, we'll have to stop here. We're moving to chapter 7 in the next class. Okay, if we don't have any questions, let's look at the next one. Same November 2023. I think the last diet we looked at is Okay, same November 2023, question 6. And this one, next one is question 7. I think that should be the last one for November 2023. Okay, so the question reads, the overseas technical partners of Orlando Professional Service came for a review of operations and system of internal control of the firm. A number of audit engagement files regarding financial statements on which the firm has expressed audit opinion were selected for review. It was believed that the strategic review would be necessary to determine the appropriate audit approach for a detailed audit plan in the firm to bring efficiency and enhance good client service delivery. The review exercise also covers the firm's basis of risk assessment on audit and assurance engagements. 2. Determination of staff recruitment, training, reward, and evaluation. Previous audit opinions on financial statements and progress on ongoing jobs. System of archival and retrieval of documents, major risks, and other factors such as industry issues, procedures and engaging, procedures for engaging and monitoring experts, both internal and external. And number 7, finally, reports from regulators. The team interviewed partners, staff, directors of major clients of the firm. It was believed that the outcome of the review exercise will help to reposition the firm and upscale strategies to get a fair share of the market in the upcoming mandatory rotation of auditors. At the end of the exercise, it was reported that the audit strategy of the firm was not robust enough, too generic, and lacked focus to meet the firm's need in the next decade. The team recommended that proactive steps should be taken to evolve a good strategy that will stand the test of time in the light of the increasing competition in the audit and assurance marketplace. As a staff of the firm, you have been selected as a member of the committee to develop the new audit strategies for submission in the next 2 weeks for the consideration and approval of the Executive Council of Orlando Professional Services required. Okay. A. Outline the approaches to the main audit strategies your firm is expected to adopt. B. Explain the factors that will be considered in the selection of audit strategies. 4 marks. C. Explain the difference between audit strategy and audit plan. 2 marks. Okay, so 15 marks in total. All right. So you see that the question is a conceptual one that tests our understanding of core audit principles, audit strategies, the factors influencing their selection, the distinction between a strategy and a plan. I think the scenario of Orlando Professional Services provides a clear context for why a firm will need to reevaluate its audit strategy. Okay, so let's look at the solution. Okay. All right, so I think the solution provides for part A. I think the solution gives a good comprehensive list and explanation of the main strategies. Then for the B part, okay, it correctly lists key factors influencing the choice of strategy, and part C succinctly explains the difference between a strategy and a plan. Okay, so let's look at the examiner's report. It highlights a common weakness, the inability to differentiate between audit strategy and audit plan, okay? Suggesting that while candidates might have a general understanding, they lack the precise technical knowledge required for the professional exam, okay? A precise technical knowledge required for a professional exam. Okay, so let's take note of the examiner's report. Let's get back to part A and see how to write this. Part A. Okay. So for the part A, what do you write? Talking about main audit strategy. The question asks us to outline the main strategies or audit strategies your firm would expect to adopt. So you should identify and explain the key strategies that an audit firm uses. Then how do we write it? Present your answer in a clear and structured list. So for each strategy, provide a brief professional explanation of what it is and when it will be used. So the provided solution does well by outlining the statement of financial position approach, substantive testing approach, system-based approach, and risk-based business risk approach. So a good approach is to start with a heading for each strategy, like you've seen, and then use a couple of bullet points to explain its features and applicability. I think that would suffice. Then for the B part, what to write, you need to explain the factors, what to write, because you need to address the factors that a firm like Orlando Professional Service would so consider when selecting an audit strategy for a client. So how do you write it? Use a bullet list or numbered list, like you've seen, to outline the key factors. So the provided solution gives us examples, the size of the client business, explaining why different strategies are suited for small or large companies. And the second one, control environment, emphasizing a strong control system allows for system-based approach. And audit firm methodology, highlighting that larger firms often favor risk-based approaches due to their resources and nature of the client's business. Speaks to pointing out how a specific industry, for example, e-commerce, may require a particular approach. So the solution is a perfect one, is a good one. So work with it. For the C aspect, what do you write? The most crucial part of this question, I think, is the C aspect, but it's the lowest mark anyway. It's clearly explaining the conceptual difference between a broad audit strategy and a detailed audit plan. So how to write? I think a table is an excellent way to present this information clearly and concisely. But if you don't use a table, it's fine. Use a bullet list like you've seen the examiner provide. A bullet list, a numbered list will suffice with contrasting points. So audit strategy, when you hear audit strategy, you need to think of this as the big picture or the roadmap. It defines the scope, the timing, and direction of the audit. It is a high-level document. So think of the big picture when it comes to audit strategy or a roadmap, a blueprint. It defines the scope, the timing, and direction of the audit. So it's a high-level document. Then for the audit plan, it's a detailed action plan that specifies the nature, timing, and extent of the audit procedures to be performed. Actually, the audit plan is derived from the audit strategy. So a good analogy I can provide is the difference between a building's architectural blueprint. If you want to build a house, the architectural blueprint is a strategy, and the detailed construction schedule and master list is the plan, something like that. So that should help you understand at least the difference between both audit strategy and the audit plan. Okay, so a general strategy is for you to be able to earn marks. You have to be precise and professional. So use correct auditing terminology when writing such questions. Then avoid vague statements. Try to use terminologies as you see in the solution. It's important to understand that structure is king. And that is why some people feel AAA paper, structure. Try to, in fact, I use structure is king, like they say, the customer is king. Structure is king. So use headings, bullet points to make your answer easy to read and also easy to mark. So structure is very important. As you're going through this solution, try to follow that structure. Then contextualize your answers. So while parts B and C are more theoretical, you can briefly link them back to the scenario. Like a firm trying to be more efficient and competitive and demonstrate deeper understanding. So for example, for part B, mention that Orlando Professional Services needs to consider client size and industries to select the right strategy, something like that. So the marking guide now, if you look at the marking key, allocates 0.5 marks for each of the 4 audit approaches and 1 mark for up to 7 explanation points. So this means you should name all 4 key strategies, For each strategy, provide a concise explanation, maybe 1 to 2 sentences of what it entails and its typical application. Please ensure your explanations are distinct from each other. Don't jumble them together. And for the B part, I think the guide allocates 1 mark for each of the 4 factors. So you need to list and briefly explain 4 distinct factors that influence the selection of an audit strategy. The factors listed in the solution are perfect for this. And the C part, 1 mark for each of the 2 differences. So your solution, your answer should contain at least 2 clear, distinct points for comparison. The core distinction is that, like I said earlier, the strategy, the audit strategy is high level and sets the direction, where the audit plan is detailed. It's a detailed document and sets the specific procedures, something like that. Okay, so those are my thoughts on question that November, the last question in November 2023. So any questions? Any questions? We've exhausted the last 2 questions on November 2023 that tested practically the audit approach. Any questions, contributions? Any thoughts?
It's very clear and direct, sir. Very clear.
Okay, fantastic. That's good to hear. Thank you for that feedback, Samuel. All right, so it will now be left for you guys to practice with it as you read the chapter. Please practice with it. Okay, so let's look at May 2023 quickly. We'll finish November 2023 and let's look at May 2023. Question 3A and B was on Messrs PK Industries Limited. So just the A and B part covered the audit approach. The question reads, Messrs PK Industries Limited was incorporated and operates its business in Nigeria. The company has existed over the years. During most of this period, it imported some major components from China. Imports usually take some time to arrive after necessary forms have been completed and submitted to the bank. 2 of the directors have 2 other companies that supply fuel and other local resources needed by the company. The company's directors are aware of this, but prefer to do their business rather than patronize their other suppliers. In the last few years, the turnover of the company fluctuated between 500 million and 1 billion. The 2 other companies owed by the 2 directors are currently trading on loans granted by the company. Following what was considered to be an increasing harsh economic environment and high cost of power supply, the company registered a subsidiary company with a production outfit in Ghana, while still maintaining its head office operations in Nigeria. Part of the raw materials needed in Ghana are procured in Nigeria and transported to Ghana through hired trailers. This process is being used until a suitable supplier is found in Ghana. The company decided to hold the next AGM in the company's premises in Ghana, with all the directors, shareholders traveling to Ghana on a direct flight from Abuja to Accra at the company's expense. It was decided that it was an opportunity to evaluate the Ghanaian environment for further business decisions. The audit of the Nigerian company and its Ghanaian company were done by different firms. Required. Evaluate the risks involved in the scenario above, 5 marks. B. Discuss the risk assessment procedures that the auditors of Messrs PK Industries Limited need to adopt as required by ISA 550. Wow, okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, you see that this question is a multifaceted question. In fact, a multifaceted risk-based question that tests our ability to identify different types of risks, so business and financial statement risks, and also apply a specific international standard on auditing, ISA 550, to the facts. So I think the case study or the scenario is rich with red flags, particularly regarding related parties, group audit considerations. So the solution, as you can see, correctly identifies a range of risks and outlines the general requirements of ISA 550. So generally, let's see the performance. Let's look at what the examiner said. The examiner's report indicates that many candidates struggled, okay, with applying the technicalities of ISA 550, I think, which is a common issue when specific ISAs are referenced. You may, under exam condition, forget them. So the key to, I think, success in tackling this kind of paper is moving beyond general knowledge of risk to demonstrating a precise understanding of the required procedures outlined in the standards. So I think the solution gives us a perfect roadmap. The solution for part A is good. The solution for part B specifies specific solution for part B. Okay. Okay, the solution for part B includes specific audit procedures in addition to risk assessment. Okay, all right. So let's look at what to and how to write this multifaceted question. How do we write it? What do we write and how do we write? So you need to, for the A part, evaluate the scenarios or the risks involved in the scenario. So what to write, you need to identify and classify both business risks and the financial risks from the scenario. So that's what you need to write. Then how do you write it? A well-structured, numbered or bulleted list, like you've seen, numbered list is the most effective way to present this. So for each risk, state it clearly and then briefly explain why it's a risk. So for business risks, there are business risks are risks to the company's ability to achieve its objectives. In simple form, business risks are those risks to the company's ability to achieve its objectives. So for example, from the scenario, it includes operational risk, like transporting raw materials from Nigeria to Ghana via hire trailers is inefficient and risky. Look at the risk of loss or damage on transit, something like that. And financial risk from the case talks about granting loans to related parties, directors, companies at potentially unfavorable terms. Could drain companies' resources. Those are the financial risks you could point out. Then for strategic risk, expanding to a new country, which is Ghana, without a clear strategy or proper supplier base, yes, is a significant business risk. So those three, operational, financial, and strategic risk, come under the business risk. Then for the financial statement risks are risks that the financial statement will be materially misstated. So examples from the scenario include related party transactions, like we saw, the completeness and valuation. You see the loans to directors' companies and transactions with their fuel supply business may not be properly valued or fully disclosed, and it could lead to risk of misstatement. Then for the group audit consolidation risk, having different auditors for the parent in Nigeria and the subsidiary in Ghana, those two companies creates a risk that consolidation adjustments are not properly made or may not be properly made, or that the components auditors' work is not adequate, something like that. So aside the group audit or consolidation risk, we also have the foreign currency translation risk. Transactions in different currencies, the Naira and the Cedi, create a risk of misstatement due to incorrect currency conversion, something like that. So your thoughts should generally center around those risks. So the solution, you see delineated business risks, financial statements risks. So read through and practice with this. And for the B part, we're asked to discuss the risk assessment procedures that the auditor needs to adopt as required by ISA 550. So what do you write? It's actually a direct test of your knowledge of ISA 550, which deals with related party transactions. So you need to outline the specific procedures an auditor must perform. So how do you write that? Begin by stating the procedures. State that the procedures are part of the auditor's risk assessment and as required by ISA 550. Then use Like the examiner has used the numbered list. Look at the consistency in numbering. Follow that roadmap, please. Use that list to detail the procedures. The key is to be specific as required by the standards. And the first thing ISA 550 requires is inquire of management. The auditor must ask management about the identity of all related parties, the identity first, the nature of their transactions, and all related parties' transactions entered into during the period under review. The auditor must also obtain an understanding of controls, the company's internal controls over identification, authorization, and disclosure of related party transactions. Then the auditor must maintain professional skepticism. He must be alert to the fact that related party transactions may occur outside the normal course of business. And he also needs to examine records, scrutinize records like board minutes, shareholders meeting minutes, bank confirmations for any indication of undisclosed related party transaction. And he also needs to evaluate and assess the risk of material misstatements related to related parties, and also consider if transactions have been properly accounted for and disclosed in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework, which is IFRS. So if you look at the provided solution, you'll see that the B part mentions ISA 240 and 315, which is correct, as these standards actually underpin all risk assessment. So your answer must go in line with this and focus specifically on the requirements of ISA 550, actually. So if you don't mention 240, it's fine. Focus on the specific requirements of ISA 550 as required by the question. So generally, general strategies for earning your marks with such a question, you need to apply the facts. The most common mistake is candidates provide generic or textbook answers. So I try to avoid that. So for every point, briefly, you could link it back to the scenario. For example, when discussing related party transaction, mention the two directors who owned other companies supplying the business. Mention it, and you get your mark very easily. So apply the facts in the case. Then use ISAs correctly. When an ISA is mentioned, ensure you reference it and use the correct terminology from that standard to answer the question. Then also structure your response. Use clear headings for each part of the question, or a bulleted list, numbered list is excellent for breaking down procedures and risks. And don't forget time management. It's a high mark question. I think everything is, how many marks? 16 marks in all. Wow. So allocate your time accordingly. Spend more time on the 11 mark part question, which is B. Then aim for 5 or 6 points for part A, and the comprehensive list for part B, something like that. So let's look at the marking key. Okay. So the marking key provided. So for part A, the marking guide allocates 1 mark for any 3 business risks and 1 mark for any 2 financial statement risk, for a total of 5 marks. Okay, this means you should aim to identify and briefly justify at least 3 business risks and 2 financial statement risks. But the distinction between the two is crucial to gain or pick your few marks. And for part B, the marking guide allocates 1 mark for an introduction and 2 marks for each of 5 points, totaling 11 marks. Okay. So the key here, I think, is to provide detailed and distinct procedures. Your points should be specific actions an auditor would take, such as inquiring of management and obtaining an understanding of internal controls, as these are directly from the ISA, which is 550. Simply stating assess risk or evaluate risk is too generic. So try to align very properly. All right, so that's it for this question on May 2023. So any questions, observations, as we are running speedily to see how much we can cover. Any questions, observations, so that we can speedily move? Any questions? So I think that was the only question for May 2023 that tested the audit approach. So we're going down to November 2022. Okay, I believe, like Samuel said, we are getting understanding of the nuggets. All right, so let's look at this question on November 2022, question 2, speaking to Poki Limited. Okay, so the question reads, the finance controller of Poki Limited made an observation on the draft engagement letter sent by the external auditors to the company, an extract of which is stated below. The responsibility for safeguarding the assets of the company and for the prevention and detection of fraud, error, and non-compliance with laws and regulations rests with the company directors. In accordance with auditing standards, we shall endeavor to plan our audit so that we have a reasonable expectation of detecting material misstatements in the financial statements or accounting records, including any material misstatements resulting from fraud, error, or non-compliance with laws or regulations. However, because any internal control structure, no matter how effective, cannot eliminate the possibility that errors or irregularities may occur and remain undetected, and because we use selective testing in our audit, we cannot guarantee that errors or irregularities, if present, will be detected. Accordingly, our audit should not be relied upon to disclose any such material misstatements of fraud, errors, or instances of non-compliance as may exist. The best safeguard against irregularities and fraud is a sound system of internal control. We will report to you from time to time on any significant weakness in controls which come to our notice and which ought to be brought to your attention. The matters raised in any report to you are not necessarily a comprehensive statement of all weaknesses that exist or of all improvements that should be made. The finance controller accused the auditors of running away from their responsibilities of exposing to the owners of the company fraudulent financial reporting and misappropriation of assets. To him, what is the purpose of audit when fraud and errors could not be discovered? He has threatened to discuss with the board of directors and insist that the engagement letter will not be signed until those sections are removed. You are a senior member of the audit team. Required. The C part of the question states, state the procedures auditors should perform to identify the risk of material misstatement due to fraud. Okay? I think based on the scenario, the question tests the key part of the auditor's responsibility, I think, under ISA 240, which is the auditor's responsibility relating to fraud in an audit of financial statement. So the scenario, I think, presents a direct conflict between the auditor's responsibility or the auditor's professional responsibility and the client's misunderstanding of those responsibilities. Something like that. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, Kachi, please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Nice to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I was expecting something. The question I was expecting to see something like around audit expectation gap in this question.
Yeah. Yes, I think it's there, but we are treating the questions based on the chapters. So audit expectation gap is there, but it's not in chapter 6. That is why it's expunged. We are treating any question on audit approach, risk, and all that. Yes, that's why we don't have it. I think the A or B part also tested audit expectation gap or something.
Because the scenario speaks so loud to that stuff.
Exactly. If you look at the expectation gap chapter we looked at, which chapter is that? That was chapter 4, right? That be chapter 3. Now we treated the same question in that place, but we spoke to expectation gap.
Thank you.
In that chapter. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Thank you for that engagement. So, looking at the risk now, we said the question was asking us on the risk of material misstatements due to fraud. So from the solution, I think the solution correctly lists some of the key risk assessment provided as required by ISA 240. Okay. However, okay. I think the solution, it's a bit clear. And let's look at the examiner's report. examiner's report, it rightly points out that candidates often fail to understand the different responsibilities of management, those charged with governance, and the auditor regarding fraud. Okay, the question is a practical application. Yeah, I think the question is a practical application of the theoretical concepts on these. Okay, so that's a good one. So what and how do we write this question? You see, it specifically asks for the procedures. The question asks for the procedures the auditor should perform to identify the risk of material misstatements due to fraud. And this requires us to outline the inquiries and assessments an auditor makes during the planning and risk assessment phase of the audit. So how do we write this? You need to start by referencing, if you can remember. It's actually hard under exam condition to remember ICAN 240, especially when it's not mentioned in the question. But if you can remember, it's good to reference it as it's the specific guidelines that govern this area of risk of material misstatement or fraud during an audit. So use the numbered list the examiner used or a bullet list, something like that. So organize your thoughts, your points logically. A good structure should be, number one, inquiries of management. Speaking to detail, you need to detail the specific questions an auditor would ask the financial controller or other management personnel, such as their assessment of fraud risks and the controls they have in place. Like I've told you, when I worked with the Big Four in my last place of employment, the first thing before they even start, they will send you a fraud risk assessment questionnaire to the internal auditor to respond. So inquiring of management first is a way to assess the fraud risk and the controls in place. So the big four, I think the PwC I've worked with are good at that. Before the inception of the audit or kickoff of the audit, they start with that. Then the inquiries of others. A good structure will speak about inquiries of management, like I've said, inquiries of others. Expand your inquiry to include those charged with governance, maybe the board of directors, internal audit if there is, and even operational staff to get a comprehensive review. Like I said, when they are inquiring, the Big Four PwC, they send the fraud risk assessment questionnaire to the internal audit. They send it to me when I was there that time. Then also remember analytical procedures. Explain how an auditor would use analytical procedures to identify unusual trends or relationships that might signal fraud. So for instance, a upward surge in revenue at year end could be a red flag for fictitious sales or revenue spike, something like that. Then you need to also consider fraud risk factors. Determine how the auditor evaluates whether any fraud risk factors are present. And these factors are conditions or events that increase the likelihood of fraud, such as the dominant FC who threatens the auditor, as you can see in this scenario, so something like that. Then you need to also discuss among the audit team. Another thing, mention the requirement for the auditor to have a brainstorming session to discuss the susceptibility of the financial statements to material misstatements due to fraud, something like that. The thoughts around that would suffice. And your general strategies for earning the mark, please be specific. Avoid vague statements like check for fraud. Instead of saying that, use precise language like perform analytical procedures or make inquiries of management and those charged with governance. Those technical statements earn you your marks seamlessly. So avoid vague statements, please, and try to link your answers to the scenario. While the question is about general procedures, a brief mention of how they apply to Poki Limited would strengthen your answer, actually. So, for example, mention that the auditor's inquiries will focus on the finance controller's assessment of fraud risk, given his contentious behavior, something like that. And then another strategy is show knowledge of the ISAs by referencing the relevant ISA 240. Shows that, or it will demonstrate a strong grasp of the professional standard. So try to memorize this ISA, please, and try to cover all key areas. Ensure your answers cover the main or covers the main categories of fraud risk assessment procedures: inquiries, number 1, analytical procedures, number 2, and evaluation of fraud risk factors, number 3. So the marking guide, let's see how to pick our marks. The marking guide allocates 7 marks in total, with 1 mark for each. Okay, it means you need to provide at least 7 distinct, well-explained procedures. And they provide, I think the solution, for provided solution by the examiner gives 4 main points, but each has, I think, sub-points that can be expanded to get the full point. So I think here is a breakdown. Here is a breakdown, 4 main points, and this order. Okay, number 1 has the, okay. So I think 4 main points you could glean from is inquire of management about their own risk assessment, about their own assessment of fraud risk is 1 mark. Then the second point, inquire about management's process of identifying and responding to risk, to fraud risks is another 1 mark. Then third point is inquire if management is aware of any actual, suspected, or alleged fraud is another 1 mark. Then point 4, inquire of those charged with governance, the board of directors, about their oversight of management's fraud risk assessment is another 1 mark. That's number 4. Then number 5, perform analytical procedures to identify unusual or unexpected relationships, such as a sudden increase in accounts receivable is another 1 mark, tenable. Then point 6, you could say consider the fraud risk factors identified in the scenario. For example, the FC's dominant behavior, the lack of commitment to internal controls are indicative of a high risk of material misstatement. You could pick another 1 mark. And point 7, the audit team should hold a brainstorming session to discuss how and where the financial statements might be susceptible to fraud is the last mark you could pick. All right. So that's it for this question on fraud risk assessment. All right. So any questions? Let's see if we can touch this one before we go on break. I know we've been long. We started 8 on dot. So I'd like to stop 9 on the dot. Let me see if I can run through this question. Okay, it's just the C part and it's 3 marks. So let's run through this question quickly. If we don't have any questions, observations, then we'll go on break. All right, so the question reads, which is question 5 in November 2022. At the weekly meeting of an audit firm, it was reported that a new client or new audit client, Salisa Limited, has just been won. An implementation team has been constituted with a manager as the head. At the meeting of the implementation team, the manager stated that there is the need for the team to work on the audit planning strategy, the contents of which will form the audit planning memorandum that would be presented to the audit committee. He stated further that a professional clearance has to be sent to the former auditor, after which background check will be performed on the directors and other principal officers of the company. It is also believed that for proper risk assessment, there is the need to understand the business operations of the company. He stated further that the audit would be structured into both interim and final audits. An experienced member of the team also mentioned the need for the auditor to adopt attitude of professional skepticism. Hence, the planning should be done in such a way that the audit can be executed in an effective manner. He stated further that planning the audit will involve the whole engagement team to establish an understanding of the terms of the engagement as required by IC 210, and this will help to establish an overall strategy for the audit. The development of the audit plan will include the nature, timing, extent of planned risk assessment procedures. This will enhance further audit procedures and documentation of the overall audit strategy. As an experienced auditor in the firm, you've been approached by some junior staff at the meeting to explain further to them on the discussion held with the manager. Required. Explain and illustrate what the establishment of the overall audit strategy involves. 3 marks. So that's the C part that aligns with the audit approach in chapter 6. Okay, just a 3-mark question. Actually, it's small marks, but it's small, but then think the question is straightforward. I think the question is a straightforward test of core auditing, this same concept of overall audit strategy we're talking about. And the scenario provides a practical context. Think of a new engagement, making this audit approach, chapter 6, highly relevant. Okay, so I think from the solution is a solid but brief list of the key components of an audit strategy. It currently identifies the scope, the reporting objectives, the focus, and the resources. Okay. So let's see the examiner's report. Examiner's report indicates that many candidates struggle with this and with broader ethical and professional conduct topics, which were also part of the question. Okay. So the other parts, okay. And this suggests a common weakness in connecting theoretical concepts to practical real-world application. Yeah, it's a common challenge which you need to address during practice, connecting theory to practice, to applying it to real-world scenario. It's a general challenge, so please address it in your practice so that you'll be able to align properly. So what do we write? How do we write it? What do we write? How do we write? It's a 3-mark question, but then what do we write and how do we write it? So you see the question asks us to explain and illustrate. That's the point or the prompt. Explain and illustrate. So don't forget that. And it means we need to establish the overall strategy involved, and it requires us to define the concept and provide specific examples. So how do we write it? You need to start with a high-level definition of the overall strategy. Think of the overall strategy as the scope, the timing, and direction of the audit. The scope, the timing, and the direction of the audit. So use the numbered list as you've seen, or bulleted list, to explain the key elements. The provided solution structure is a good model you need to follow and practice with. So for scope, it talks about what defines the audit. So for example, the financial reporting framework, industry-specific rules, client location, that's the scope. And for objectives, what are deadlines and reporting requirements? For example, the AGM date format of the audit report should speak to the objectives. Then for the focus, what are the key areas of attention? For example, high-risk areas, materiality, internal controls, that should be the focus. And also resources. What and who do you need in areas of experienced staff, specialists, timing of field work. So crucially for each point, provide an illustration from the scenario or a general example to demonstrate your understanding. So for a new client like Salisa Limited, you mention things like determining the financial reporting framework to be used, e.g. IFRS, or allocating more experienced staff to high-risk areas like revenue recognition for a new business, something like that. So generally, your strategy to earn your marks should be, please read the prompt carefully. Please read the prompt and pay attention to keywords like explain and illustrate. So a simple list is not enough. Explain and illustrate. So you must provide some context or example. And don't forget to always use professional terminologies in writing, like overall audit strategies, scope, timing, direction, materiality, risks assessment. Such terminology shows professionalism. You're not just writing vague statements as if you are the one that is marking it. So know that somebody else is marking you. So try to give the examiner what he wants. And structure your answer. A clear, logical structure with headings or bullet points makes your answer easier for the marker to follow. And don't forget, focus on application. While this is a theoretical question somehow, relating it to the scenario of Salisa will earn you more marks. So for instance, when discussing resources, mention that for a new client, you need more time and experienced staff to understand the business from scratch, something like that. Then the marking key, marking key now, allocates 1 mark for any or for each of any 3 explained points. This means you need to provide at least 3 distinct and well-explained concepts. I think the solution offers 4 main points with sub-points, which gives you ample material to practice with and read. So to get the full points or full marks, you should select 3 of the main points from the provided solution. For example, scope, reporting objectives, and resources. Then clearly state each point. For example, determining the scope of the engagement is a clear example. Then provide a brief, clear explanation of each point. So for instance, this involves setting the boundaries of the audit, such as financial reporting framework and the locations of the company operations, something like that. And add a specific illustration or example to demonstrate your understanding. So for instance, for Salisa Limited, this will involve determining if they have any overseas branches or subsidiaries that need to be included in the audit, something like that. So generally, it's a 3-mark question. So you're wondering, why will we overflog this question like this? But then, please, it may be jumbled up in a lot of questions. So try to give proper context to how you attack such a question. All right, so any question, ladies and gentlemen, it's 9:01. I'll have to stop here. So go on break. Any questions?